The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation. Today is Tuesday, April 25th. I am Allison Johnston, Professional Development Coordinator for Maryland's Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the second event of our Tech Tuesday series. Today's session is entitled Enabling Technology and Quality of Life, My Home, My Health, My Family. Before we begin, I would like to remind you of a few things about today's webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. This session is being recorded. There are two handouts for today's presentation, and they can be found in the handout section on the panel box. Questions can be typed in the question or chat box in the webinar panel, and we will get to those throughout the presentation. Now I'd like to turn this presentation over to Stephanie Jones, Statewide Director of Innovation for DDA.
Good afternoon. As Allison said, my name is Stephanie Jones. I'm the Director of Innovations for the Maryland Department of Health and Developmental Disabilities Administration. Welcome to our second Tech Tuesday webinar. Together, DDA and the Maryland Technology Task Force are excited to continue to present this series to all Marylanders seeking to better utilize technology to enhance their lives of those with disabilities. As mentioned in our last week's DDA Connection newsletter, we will be raffling off a $50 Tech First raffle to one lucky attendee who will be selected from those of you who stay on the webinar to the very end. So stay tuned. The good stuff is always at the end. Before I introduce our presenter for today, we have a couple of questions, poll questions we would like to go through in order to learn a little bit about who is joining us today. So Allison, please post the first question. How do you identify? Please select one. Are you a self-advocate, a family member, or a provider with us today? Okay, close the question. And the results, we have a lot of providers and family members. Thank you. Please post our second question. We would like to know, do you currently use some form of technology to navigate your day? Close the question. 93% say yes. Our next question. We would like to know if anyone has talked to you about the availability of technology in your service array. Close the question. Awesome, 53% have had that. And I think we have one more question for now. And let us know where you are watching us from. What region do you represent? You can close the question. Oh, we got a good mix of people watching us today. Thank you, Allison. We'll have 2 more questions at the end if you guys would just hold on. So now I'd like to present to you our speaker for today. Harold Sloves is an innovative consultant for intellectual and developmental disability service systems, networks, and tailing consulting, speaking engagements in multiple states. The focus of this engagement has been the paradigm shift towards integrating enabling technology supports as a primary option for people with intellectual disabilities. Harold is also principal collaborator in the launch of a Technology First Alliance, TFA. TFA is a nonprofit think tank consulting and membership organizations designed to be a national and international technology first catalyst. This professional chapter follows his role as the director of the Division of Program Innovations with Tennessee Department of Intellectual Disabilities. During his tenure as Innovation Director, Harold led a multidisciplinary team to find, develop, test, and offer innovative solutions for people, their families, and their providers. The division encompassed enabling technology, empowerment, innovation, community inclusion, and workforce transformation. During this time, Tennessee assumed a leading role in fostering a national technology first movement through the creation of National Consortium of Technology States. Harold has held numerous provider leadership roles, providing a range of community services for adults and adolescents with cognitive disabilities and behavioral health issues. Let us welcome Harold Sloves to Maryland. Thank you, Harold. Take it away. You have to take yourself off mute. We can't.
Well, actually, somebody muted me.
Okay.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. It sounded like I did a lot of work, but frankly, it was fun. So I'm grateful that I was invited to be here, and I'm excited to share this presentation with you again this month. So today we're going to be talking about the role of technology where people live again, at home. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about the role of technology to help people manage their health. And that's how we're going to be kicking off today. That's during about the halfway point. I'm going to be introducing you to a colleague who's a national leader in the role of technology in people's lives. But to start off, I just want to take a very brief look back at something that I believe is very important and something that we just have to continue to remember as we go forward. And that is that it doesn't take a lot of technology to have an impact on someone's life. A small amount of technology can make all the difference for a person if it is selected in a thoughtful way that is tuned into what the person is really seeking in terms of more independence in their lives. Secondly, again, there's a myth that technology is going to make everybody independent. The truth is that everybody has an optimum or maximum level of independence in their lives. Am I fully independent? No, I need help with a lot of things in different ways. And that is true for all of us. And in saying this, particularly with respect to people with intellectual disabilities who are enrolled in your waivers, we have to be mindful that there is a dynamic, complementary relationship between the role of enabling technology and the role of paid supports, direct support professionals in someone's lives. It is not static. Some people over time are going to want more technology, perhaps less. The same is true for paid supports. So it is continually reassessed in terms of how much of each kind of support a person wants and or needs. So I really want to emphasize that, particularly for family members out there. It is based on the person, and it is constantly changing as that person changes and accommodates or adjusts to the role of technology in their life. Okay, shall we go to the next, please? All right, so we're going to kick it off with health management, and we're going to look at two particular types of enabling technology today. One will be automated medication dispenser systems. There is a tremendous range of options among these different systems. We're going to take a look at just two today, but as you can see, some of them are simply a disc that store medication, and you're going to look at a couple of others today just to give you an idea of what's possible. Secondly, we're going to look at the role of wearables and managing a person's health. Some of you out there may already be doing this. You may have a Fitbit. You may have an Apple Watch. This technology is not futuristic. It is now. You can check your heart rate, your blood pressure, your oxygen levels already today with readily available devices that are out there. We're going to be looking at a couple that are a little bit different in terms of what they measure. And I will say Harold's opinion that wearables and portable technology is where our field will be heading. So I hope you will pay attention to this aspect of our presentation. Next one, please. This is a very broad, generic definition of medication dispensers. The fact is that they're locked and programmable, and that programming is again customizable, and we have to recognize that the alerts that go out go both to the person using that system, but they can also be used to alert others in that person's life, whether it's a family member or a DSP. And again, it's all based on that person's needs. You can get an alert that someone did take their medication, or you can an alert that they did not, and you can say, tell me in 30 minutes if it's not taken, and you will get that alert. Some of these systems will also give you an alert if somebody tries to get into the system when it's not time for medication. So these systems are getting smarter and smarter. At the very bottom of the slide, there's a very small link, but essentially what I'm trying to convey is that there's research out there that shows that there are fewer medication errors when automated medication systems are used versus when healthcare personnel or paid personnel dispense these meds. So that's certainly something worth noting. When there's a med error, there is no judgment by a med dispenser system. It either is or it isn't. Okay, next slide, please. So you're looking at, as I mentioned, two extremes, if you will, in terms of med dispenser options. The first one that you see on the left is Livy. The website for this, by the way, is Livy at Home. They look like a cord, and as you can see, and we're going to do a side-by-side comparison in just a moment. But these are high-capacity, really smart devices that are readily available on Amazon. So you don't have to go through a lot of hoops to get one, other than whatever your waiver regulations stipulate for a person to be able to take their own medication via some sort of technology support. The device on your right, as you can see, is pretty small, The reason it's there is because it is portable. It is not reliant on just Wi-Fi. It will run on cellular service. And so one of the things that I really like about this is, let's say someone has a job and has to take medication during that person's work hours. They can take this with them, get the alert, and take their medication. Many years ago, when I was running a supported employment program, and this is back in the day of pagers and faxes as being our primary communication. We had a fellow working at a Home Depot who had to take his medications while he was at work. He had a pretty serious seizure disorder. So the way we accommodated back in those dark ages is that the office would call him, page him to come to the office, and they would help him take his medication. That was our accommodation for when somebody had to take the medication while working. And of course, this was dependent on the willingness of the employer to do it. Today, we have other options available to us. Okay, next slide, please. So here is the side-by-side that I mentioned earlier. One of the really unique features of the Livy system is that it has the ability to dispense as needed, or as we call PRN medications. Now, I'm not talking about narcotics, of course, that's a whole different ballgame. But let's say someone has a PRN or as needed prescription for Tylenol when they get a headache, just as a simple example. This system gives that person the ability to contact offsite an RN to say they want to take this PRN medication. So this RN, using his or her judgment, has the ability remotely to release that PRN medication for that person. That is pretty unique. This dispenser system's capacity for 15 prescriptions, up to 15 prescriptions, and supplements is also quite unique. So it definitely has a role in a person's life, depending on what their medication needs are and that kind of thing. The dose flip is a whole different ballgame. It is portable, doesn't need Wi-Fi. I will tell you a downside is that it's going to eat up the battery. So you're going to have, if you're toting it around with you, the ability to recharge it as needed. But I really put value on its portability and the ability for someone to take it with them wherever they may be. Okay, next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about wearables today, and I think this is some really groundbreaking stuff. Awake Labs is out of Canada, and they have developed a watch and an app for people with cognitive disabilities. This is specifically to anticipate physiological changes that lead to someone having a behavioral outburst. And we're going to get to that a little bit in more detail in just a moment. Empatica was developed by an MIT spinoff outside Boston, and it has similar capabilities as the Awake Labs device, but also it was really developed specifically for people with seizure disorders and epilepsy. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. As I mentioned, the smartwatch will measure physiological changes. Some of you may know or recall that our skin is basically an organ. And as such, it has the ability to really transmit a lot of physiological information about us. That is really what these technologies are founded on. So with the Awake Labs smartwatch, it will measure strong emotions, and it could be a wide range of emotions that are detected through a galvanic skin response that this device detects. What I'm really impressed by is with the Empatica Embrace 2, the FDA has cleared this as a viable or an approved option for people with epilepsy. So in both cases, the key to these devices and systems is that they will detect certain physiological changes that typically will lead to either a behavioral issue or a seizure, and will alert a caregiver in advance of these events occurring. The value of which is that people can appropriately and in a planned way intervene with that person to either safeguard them, in the case, of course, of a seizure, or to help that person regain control and de-escalate before it becomes a crisis situation. The potential impact on a person's quality of life and the ability to enjoy their lives and communities, knowing that they have these safeguards in place, I think is significant. Shall we go to our next slide, which is our first video? And I just wanted to let everyone know, those of you who are interested in downloading this presentation today, please remember to click the video. It will take you to the site where the video resides, so you can watch it really at any time if that is of interest to you. Excuse me. So please, would you start this video? Thank you. Okay, thank you. I would like to just stop here, if I may, and ask Stephanie or other moderators if there are any questions that our audience has at this time before we move on to the next topic.
We actually do not have any questions, Harold. Just a little bit of people wanted to know about the slides and so forth, and I answered those in the chat. So we do not have any questions, so you can proceed.
Okay, all right, I shall. Okay, we're going to move on to a discussion of the role of sensors where people live. And again, I want to remind everyone that, these sensors are already in all of our lives, I would say, whether it be smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors to alert us if there are problems. Some of us have motion sensors outside our homes to help us, for lights to go on, to help us see if we're pulling into a garage or walking outside or having a campfire. I don't know. But I also want to underscore that in our world of supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, this is not ADT. These are not security systems. I really want to overemphasize that these technologies are to enable people to do stuff that they want to do, to help them, and in fact can help people learn. And we're going to talk about that very soon as we go on to the next slide, if you would please. So, I have a real bugaboo about the word monitoring. I will not use it in my vocabulary when I talk about enabling technology. These technologies, again, as I said, are meant to enable people to do stuff, and are not meant to be Big Brother. As such, these sensor systems not only interact with people who are offering remote support to that person and are available as needed, but they also can communicate and interact with the person using them in their home. They can provide all sorts of prompts to help the person get through their day. It could be as simple as, Harold, it's been 30 minutes and the stove is on. That can go to me or can go to the person next door or 2 miles away who is supporting me. It could remind me to brush my teeth and whatever it may be to help me get through my day. And I will tell you, there are many people, not all people, but many people who are supported in our service delivery systems who frankly would rather be reminded to do something by their app than by another person, whether it's family and or a paid support person. That creates a feeling of greater independence from human support. I can do this on my own, and they are simply with the support and reminders of technology. And I assure you, and I was a provider for many years, and I know many stories of the power struggles between a person and somebody telling them what to do. There are no power struggles in this scenario. Okay, may we go to the next one, which is very cluttered, I know. So what is the point, Harold? Well, the point is to say these are all the possibilities. I mean, and they are abundant. But the point is that there are very few people who are going to need all this stuff. I am currently working with a nonprofit housing developer in Tennessee, specifically developing affordable housing for people with intellectual disabilities, and currently developing a prototype home, the first of what is hoped for to be many others later. And this is the discussion. This is the fundamental discussion. What technology do we build in from the beginning that everyone will benefit from, and then stop, and then wait to see who's going to be living there, what do they want, what do they need? Everybody doesn't need everything. And I know of tale where providers put everything in a home and hardly anything got used. And I'm just not a proponent of that approach. Okay, may we go to the next, please? So in the title of this presentation, there was something about privacy, and this is the time. There are federal rules guiding where some of these systems can go, particularly cameras. So just a brief mention that these cameras, which have evolved a lot since the origins of them. I mean, bear in mind, these were way back when called granny cams. And again, it was for monitoring. It came out of the senior market. There's no question about that. It was for adult children of older parents worried about their parents at home and just to check in to make sure they were okay. Well, they play a different role today. And again, it's a more interactive kind of thing. But again, what I really want to underscore with this particular slide, and again, there's all sorts of cameras out there. There's a gazillion. Some are less obtrusive than others. Some people don't want a camera in their home, and I certainly understand that. But the point is that, like everything else, these cameras can be on sometimes, all the time, whenever a person chooses to have that kind of remote video support available. So again, going back to slide one, it's not all or nothing. And again, there is that complementary relationship when this kind of remote video support is provided versus when somebody is actually on site. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things that I don't think is talked about enough when talking heads go around the country talking about enabling technology, and that is we have to remember those who not just have cognitive or intellectual disabilities, but also physical disabilities, limited use of upper extremities or fine motor control, and of course a whole range of mobility issues. The ability to have control over my environment despite these physical issues is just huge for people to feel. I've lost control of some of my body, but I can still interact and control and manage my immediate environment. That is really impactful and meaningful stuff. And there are a variety of environmental control systems out there, all of which generally run through a tablet that a person is able to use, through icons and that kind of thing if there's any kind of comprehension issues. But I think it's really important that we have that discussion at the beginning. So before we go to the next slide, and this is a very important slide, I'm going to just give you a quick preface of it. It's about a fellow named Anthony. I met him. He lives in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The provider is the Charles Lee Center. They're a large organization. They're currently in South Carolina, North Carolina, soon Tennessee. Their leader, their CEO, has been a leader in the field for years. So I went out there back in 2018 when I was, just in a real intense information gathering mode, and met Anthony. And so what I'm going to tell you is everything you see is true. Family members out there, there's a story about his mother's going to be speaking to you. It's all real. And I think the other thing I want to say that's not really shown here, again, is that, Anthony feels independent, but I assure you, and I was there, staff are in and out all the time when wanted and needed. And I say wanted very purposely because what I saw and what I've seen is the role of paid support and DSPs change when they're not there all the time. There is a different relationship that unfolds that I think it's just beautiful to watch. So if you would go to the next slide, please, and start it. I'm going to be quiet, and I hope you enjoy this. Pretty good, huh? And by the way, there is a new video about Anthony, 2023, and he's still there. So I think that's pretty cool. My time is coming to a close when it's time for me to introduce our next guest. I'm going to take a time out for a second to see if there's any questions, Stephanie. If not, I'd be happy to make the next introduction if you tell me I should.
We still do not have any questions, so we're moving right along. Oh,
Okay.
just as I said that, we do have questions. Just as I said that, they popped up.
I should have kept going.
Let's see. It says, what tablets are there to help lights?
Well, I mean, people use iPads. I think there are other tablets that are not Apple products, but the vast majority are Apple tablets, whether it's iPads or mini pads and that kind of thing. People can use their phones too, by the way. I mean, but again, when somebody has some physical limitations, using a phone can be a little bit hard from a manipulation point of view. And I'm willing to bet our next speaker is going to answer that question. And so I'm going to, and I think I saw him for a second with us. So Stephanie, I'm going to, there he is. I'm going to introduce my colleague, my friend, Jason Ray. Jason is president of Simply Home. They are a national provider of enabling technology solutions and systems for individuals and also for organizations. Jason also is a national subject matter expert on this topic and is committed to a person-centered approach to the procurement and use of enabling technology. And he is also a founder of the Technology First Alliance that we mentioned earlier on, that is destined to be a national or perhaps even international catalyst in the technology first movement. So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Jason Ray. Jason, all yours.
Thank you very much, Harold. Hopefully we can keep this thing rolling, and as questions come in, please let me know. I'm happy to address those along the way, and I'll try to live up to the introduction that Harold gave. And if you want to move along to the next slide, we'll just jump right into it. So we're going to talk about a number of different topics around enabling technologies and home sensor systems, but first just really wanted to define what we talk about with this concept of remote support and who's on the other end, and just how does this really work in general. If you'll go to the next slide, I'll try and bring all of that together. So one of the things that's really important to understand and appreciate when we use this term of remote support is that remote support is the service of supporting someone remotely. Oftentimes when that term has been used in our industry, it really gets confused with the technology itself. And the remote support side is the service. And that is generally some form of direct support. And that could be from a natural support from a family member, it could be from a paid support. But the idea is that essentially we want to know things that happen or don't happen that technology is able to tell us. And then technology is also a conduit to provide a connection to someone without physically being present. So when we talk about remote support, we first have to differentiate between the technology, a lot of the things that Harold has already talked about in this presentation, plus a few additional things we're about to talk about, and the service. So the service is the remote support. And again, that is and should be customized based on what's most appropriate from who's actually providing that. Could be a natural support or could be a paid support. So when we look at that in the context of individuals being supported, it's not only customized around who's providing that support, but also the technology that goes into creating that service. As Harold mentioned a minute ago, doing that from a person-centered way is of vital importance in understanding the unique abilities, challenges, and preferences of each person is really important. So when we talk about how we engage with someone or the tools that we use to deploy to know when certain things happen or don't happen, there's no one-size-fits-all way of addressing that. It's really understanding, as is shown on the screen here, what John's preferences and abilities are, and what are the goals he has in his life that he's looking to achieve. So for him, it may be that we need some support with medications or knowing who's coming and going. For Shelley on the right, we need to support cooking safely or her getting up in the morning independently. And then again, the way that we engage with each person is also going to be unique. So for John, he may want some kind of support through an app. Rashid may want a phone call. And Shelley may want some kind of two-way audio-video communication. So it's really important to start from that person-centered mindset to not only understand what are the tech tools we can put in place to support each person to make sure that we meet the needs and goals that they have for their life, but also that we are providing the support to them in a way that is their preference and what is appropriate in each situation. So again, there's not a one-size-fits-all to the way the technology is designed or the way you provide that engagement and support. So that's really kind of where we want to start off our conversation. Again, is just from that person-centered perspective. So next slide. So we're going to break this down in a little bit more detail to hopefully, provide a little more context to the different types of technology solutions and what the possibilities are. And then again, how can we provide remote support when that's necessary and appropriate? And hopefully that's going to lead to some better outcomes. And one of the things I would also say, as we start to go along and talk about some of these examples, is that technology is also not going to work for everyone. So Harold may have mentioned this earlier, but an important part of that planning process is understanding, is technology the right fit? So, if we just think back about the previous slide, not everybody's going to fit into any of those kinds of areas. So understanding who's a good fit is really the first step. And then for those people who it is a good fit, again, taking that person-centered approach. So we're going to talk about an example here in just a second for a gentleman named David, and thinking about this basic premise of, again, we need to know, has something happened or not happened, so that we can engage with that person in real time to provide support and hopefully better outcomes for that person. So that's the idea behind this, enabling technology partnered with the remote support concept. So next slide. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about David and the role that tech plays in his life in a couple of different areas, but just a little bit of background on David. So David is a gentleman who has actually used technology now for about 7 or 8 years to help him live independently. And as he first started on that journey, he was coming from a situation where for the majority of his life, for all of his life, he had lived with his family. And one of his goals and the vision that he had for his life was to live on his own. He wanted his own place. And there was a lot of apprehension from his family and from his support team about how he could do that safely. And technology was one of the tools to help enable that to happen. And so these different examples are areas in David's life where he needed support, and the way that the technology works as both a natural support for David directly, but then also engages his remote support team when that's necessary and appropriate. So what I mean by a natural support, and when we talk about this idea of remote support, knowing that tech can be a great tool to help guide someone and make sure that they're successful with a lot of different things in their life. In addition to this idea of remote supporting, getting information to people who aren't physically present. So the way that David does that is pretty unique and very customized to, again, what works for him. So one of the areas where technology provides support is around cooking. So one of the things that technology looks for David is if he has left the stove on for 1 hour. Next slide, please. And when we talk about technology being a natural support, so the first step in engagement with the technology for David is actually with David directly. So instead of taking that information and getting it right to his remote support team so that they can engage, for David, there's actually an intermediate step where he's given an opportunity to manage that situation independently. And this happens actually in a number of different areas in David's life. But in this situation, if David leaves the stove on for an hour, he actually gets a reminder over some speakers that are strategically placed in his home that remind him that say, David, don't forget to turn off your stove. Now, this same kind of prompting and engagement could also be a phone call, could be a text message, could be an email. That's all happening automatically through his technology to help make sure that David addresses that situation and gives him an opportunity to manage it independently before anyone else is engaged. So that's what we talk about that's what we mean when we talk about technology being a natural support. So nobody else is engaged initially when this happens. David's given the opportunity to manage it first independently. Next slide. However, David also has that backstop of his remote support team, right? So in David's situation, if he leaves his stove on for an hour, he's going to get that prompt or reminder that says, David, don't forget to go and turn off your stove. And then he has 5 minutes to go and address that situation. As long as he does, nothing else happens with the technology, meaning it's not alerting anyone or anything like that. However, if he still doesn't turn off the stove after 5 minutes, then a message is sent to a support team so that they can now call David. They could come by if they need to, whatever based on his support protocols are appropriate in that situation. They're going to take those next steps to now engage with David in real time to help make sure that that situation gets addressed. Next slide. And so what are the outcomes? We talked about this, hopefully providing better outcomes in a situation. So for David, he's now able to live in his own home. So when David started down this journey, he had in-home support to make sure that through that transition, even though technology was in place, that he had that level of comfort and his support team had the level of understanding of how this is going to work before they started slowly fading out their in-person support and allowing David more and more independence. So, these processes are things that do evolve over some time, and they're not things that happen overnight. So in David's situation, it wasn't like he just went straight from, having 24/7 support to just tech, right? This evolved over a number of weeks and months, and we see that for some people take years even. So that's a part of that person-centered planning process is understanding what is that transition going to look like for each person as you may or maybe you don't even create new opportunities for independence. So taking just a quick step back and talking about Anthony in that video you saw. So we were fortunate enough to actually support Anthony in his home with the technology that was featured. And before Anthony actually moved into that apartment, he was living in another location where he was first exposed to a lot of the technologies that he now uses. But there was no change in the in-person support he received for a couple of years until he advocated and said, you know what, I think I can take a lot of these tools and things that I've learned here and live in my own place, right? So it doesn't always mean a change in in-person support, but in some situations it does. So for David, back to David in his situation, his support in terms of in-person is now drop-in. So he does have scheduled times when he has support team members coming by his house, and then they also provide that support as needed based on things that they may get from his technology, because he has those backups in place, right? So there's those identified things for David where he needs, different layers of support throughout the day. And again, he has the technology communicating directly with him first as that natural support, but he has his remote support team as the backup. As a part of this entire evolution for David as well, he moved. So he started out in an apartment, and he actually moved into an independent home it was right before COVID, so about 3 or 4 years ago now. And he took his technology with him. So that was a chance to kind of, look at things again and make sure that that was all aligning with, what David needed in his life. So a pretty cool story. Next slide. So last thing I want to talk about is to try and bring some of these things back together from the other perspective. So when we talk about remote support, again, there are a lot of tools and things that can really make that support as effective as possible. And if we think about David and the technology that's supporting him, one of the things that we want to make sure of in this process is that technology is actually providing the outcomes that you're hoping for them to. And the way that we do that is through the collection of information. So we have two primary tool sets that we use. One on the left is our mobile application, and on the right is our secure web dashboard that collects all the information from every time someone turns their stove on or off, gets in or out of bed, leaves the home, whatever that particular technology is. Any event that happens, regardless of whether it actually takes any action, like we talked about with David in terms of a reminder, or notify someone. So even if it doesn't do anything, we still collect that information because we want to have patterns and trends of behavior as a baseline to understand what is typical for this person. And the other thing we want to do with that information is, as those prompts or reminders or notifications are being generated, we want to know how often that's happening. So, we want to understand what are the goals and what are the priorities and outcomes for this person that we're trying to create, and is technology really aligning to, help ensure that that happens. So for David in his situation, maybe we want to make sure that he, isn't getting reminders about leaving his stove on, too frequently. If he's getting a reminder about that every day, maybe there's some additional training or things that David needs, before he's allowed more independence in cooking, right? Or if he hasn't had any kind of reminder, or his care team hasn't been alerted at all of the situation for a period of 6 months, maybe we can start to scale some of those technology supports back, right? So what we do with that information is really understand the goals and outcomes we're trying to create for this person. Are they working? How often are these things happening? So that's what the these tools are really used for, is one, active engagement. So if any situation arises in real time where a support team needs to reach out to an individual, you can know the status of that, who needs support, why they need support in real time, and you can actively engage with that person, as well as having the tools and the data to look at, are these tech supports being effective in providing the outcomes that we're hoping to, or not, and we need to adjust things. So that's a crucial part of the planning process, is understanding at the different milestones that you go through, from providing more and more remote support or more and more levels of independence before you move to a new phase. Are you being effective in what you're doing? So I know we're about out of time. I could really get into a lot of depth with this part of the conversation in particular, but I want to make sure that we stay on time because we only have about 2 or 3 minutes left, and open the floor again to any questions or thoughts that people have.
Thank you, Jason. We do not, I'm going to say we do not, and then watch, they'll start rolling it again. But at this time, we do not have any additional questions for either of you gentlemen. But I want to thank you both for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I want to encourage all of those who are watching you to please be sure to begin having these discussions as part of your PCP meetings and talking about technology. And if you're interested in any of the equipment that you saw today, or any things that Harold showed, please please be sure to look at the links, as well as remember that one of our resources and a member of our tech Technology Task Force is MTAP, and they do have some of the equipment for you to check out and to see at some of our libraries around the state. Jason, you have a question, and from our leadership, if you would be open to attending one of our case management agency meetings to show what you are presenting.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to do that. And just let us know, reach out, we'd be happy to do that. And I did want to say one additional thing to the first question that Harold had alluded that I may have some additional insight on that as well. So the question was about tablets for environmental controls. And the tablets themselves are really not nearly as important in terms of the manufacturer, the version, whether it's an Android and an Apple device. Although I would agree with Harold, we predominantly see more things in the world of Apple. But it's really about the applications that are utilized to provide that control. And those generally are available across platforms. So they're generally dedicated applications for providing those controls in a home that can run on a phone, tablet, and then across different operating systems.
Great, thank you for circling back to that. I want to thank you both again for joining us today. Allison, can you post our last our next survey question real fast? Did you learn anything new today? Close question. Yes, 93% said yes. I'm so excited about that. Very good. One more, our last question, Allison. Would you like an in-person event in the future? Close question. 66% say yes. That's awesome. Thank you all for taking the time to do all the surveys and staying to the end. I want to, as a technology first state, and as our anniversary comes up, we want to keep this series going, introducing you to what's available. So as we grow as a technology first state, teams can begin having these discussions. And as for the winner of our raffle, please tune in to our next session, May 22nd, to find out who is the winner of that. And again, thank you all for your time and for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.